This is KLEAN Radio.
Welcome, everybody out there listening to KLEAN Radio. We are a show about addiction and recovery and everything in the middle. My co-host with the most, Andrew Spanswick, is back in studio tonight.
Hey, Judah, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm hanging in there, yeah.
I think I'm in the same boat.
Yeah, hanging in there?
Hanging in there.
That's good enough.
And I'd like to welcome everybody out there. Andrew's been in the industry of helping people for a really long time.
That's what I always like to hear.
And I didn't say the years now. And
that's good.
I just said a really long time. So it could be 6 years to some.
Yeah.
People in prison. 6 years. That's a really long time.
Now, it's only 2 days in prison, right?
And so let's welcome everybody out there. Give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. We have an amazing guest we'll get to in a second tonight. I wanted to talk about something. I didn't know if you saw this story, Andrew, but there's a guy, and he's been eating pizza for the past 25 years. Mm-hmm. That's been his only meal every day, 3 times a day. And he doesn't really see the problem with it. And
is it always the same type of pizza?
He varies. It's a couple different brands, and they're not like fresh made stores in his hometown. It's like a chain. He's not fat, but he has diabetes, and he's in therapy because he sees this affecting him.
Yeah, well, that's obviously compulsive behavior. Also, people that have food addictions like that, they become fixated on thinking that that's all they can eat and that everything else will make them sick, which often is true because their body's so accustomed to that one particular food that they eat something different and they do get sick. So the body's kind of a strange thing, but yeah, that's obviously unhealthy. And
so maybe he should like ease into lasagna. Like he shouldn't go towards steaks. He should go for pizza.
You laugh, but that's actually the treatment. The treatment is to slowly add in foods that they believe are healthy. So if somebody's, say, addicted to pizza, they'll add like broccoli on top, or they'll add something even more mild, and then slowly work them away from the parts that they're used to, like the crust and the whatever, and then move them on to other foods. So.
And secondly, there's another story, and I want you to explain to people a little bit what this is, because, you know, in Philip Seymour Hoffman's apartment, also finding 50 bags of heroin, they found, anti-addiction medicine. And
buprenorphine, yeah.
Why don't you explain to people what that is? Because...
Well, buprenorphine is, there's Subutex and Suboxone as well, and buprenorphine is, it's sort of, it's a low-level opiate, and it basically acts like a blocking mechanism to the receptors that heroin and other opiates use to give people a sensation of feeling high. So it was developed as part of a public health model. So instead of people using heroin or other drugs that they were getting illegally, you can put somebody on buprenorphine, blocks the receptors, and they can't actually get high off those other drugs. And it gives them, it stabilizes them, so they're not completely off of drugs, but they're high functioning, and they don't get sick. They don't get quite the high that you would get obviously off of taking opiates to the level where an addict actually feels something when it's built up tolerance. But it gives you a chance to put someone in longer term therapy and work with them and hopefully then slowly taper them off that drug. And the studies show that if you can keep someone on buprenorphine for about a year and slowly taper them off, the chances of succeeding, of not going right back to heroin especially, or oxycodone, which are the two most popular opiates out there, is about 70% versus about 3 or 4% if you don't use it.
If you just tuned in, you are listening to KLEAN Radio. We have an amazing guest tonight. He was, the amount of movies and TV shows he's been in is absolutely insane. He was in one of my favorite movies, and this should relate to everybody on AM 1370, The Cast in Astoria, Oregon. And that's one of my favorite movies. And supposedly it's one of his favorite movies too, The Goonies. And let's welcome to KLEAN Radio, Joey Pants.
Hello, finally. Wasted 3 minutes.
Well, we got to get to
We like your work, though.
Thank you. Hey, I wanted to ask you about the drugs you were just talking about.
Sure, yeah.
Suboxone, because I'm under the understanding that you don't get the high you would get from, say, prescription drugs, and it also makes you ill if you try to take the other drug, right?
Depends.
Well, that's more antabuse.
Yeah, that's more like antabuse. But what it does is it actually blocks the receptor sites, so you don't get high, but you don't get sick either, which is the big thing.
And you can't get high, and you can take
But you do get
handfuls, and you won't OD, and you won't get high.
Not exactly accurate. Also, it depends on which drug we're talking about, because you're talking about a range of drugs.
So, Suboxone.
Suboxone.
They're using that a lot now.
The real issue, though, is that is that it still doesn't quite make you completely sober. So you're still numb. So as you start to slowly titrate off it, which means come off it slowly for those out there that don't know the word titrate, but so as you slowly come off it and you get down to like the last milligram that you're on, then you finally have to kick that. And then you have a lot of the classic symptoms of what addicts really deal with, of actually feeling feelings and having to deal with not using any type of medication or drug to help suppress feelings. And people that are traditionally opiate addicts, their general condition or motivation for using drugs is to feel numb and not feel anything.
Right.
And so there's a lot of controversy about using a drug that actually allows for some of those effects to occur without, but still be functional for long periods of time.
There was, in my state, there were only like 700 doctors that were allowed.
Yeah, it's you still have to take a special course in most states and become actually licensed.
I recently read that they're lifting that ban so it can be provided to anybody.
Yeah, the problem with that is that now we have sort of like buprenorphine mills or Suboxone mills where doctors have found out that they can get a lot of clients coming in looking for the drug, and it's an expensive drug, and so people are now sort of like opening specialty little clinics, general practitioners and people that generally aren't specialists in addiction or psychiatry. So
I think that's actually really important to talk about because that's been going on for a while. You have heart specialists, giving you antidepressants or GPs hand out psychiatric medications all the time and to a fault. And we know that, there's a lot of studies that have been showing that antidepressants they have basically a placebo effect 40% of the time. And that's because you got GPs handing out a lot of antidepressants to people that don't really understand the true dynamics of depression, or they don't see the client long enough or engage with them long enough to really recognize whether it's a situational depression and temporary or whether they truly have some biochemical depression that needs to be treated with medication. You're listening to KLEAN Radio. We're in the studio tonight with Joe Pantoliano, who's been in pretty much every movie since 1983. One of the things you're open and honest about is that you dealt with clinical depression since the 90s.
Yeah, I was only diagnosed, I think, in 2006. And I became addicted. My personality... What I want to talk about in relation to this is the co-occurring nature of addiction and mental unrest, emotional unrest. And what happened with me, make a long story short, is I discovered that I had run for 30 years. I was a jogger. I ran. Every time this feeling came, I would run, and I was successful. And I didn't have to... Like most drugs, I didn't have to run more. I could do it 25 to 40 minutes, 5 days a week, and it regulated my mood. It was when I fell off a roof and got hurt that I couldn't run anymore, and my life started getting darker and darker. I started losing joy in things that were really fun for me, and behaviors aroused. Once my doctor told me that I wasn't alone, it wasn't my fault, because I thought that success would fill up this emptiness. And the more successful I became, the deeper the hole became. And I blamed myself, and I felt ashamed because why wasn't it going away, and what was wrong with me, and shame on you. But it was only when I was diagnosed that I felt like I hit the lottery. There was no shame there. Knowing what the problem was, and it didn't belong to me, and that it was genetic in nature, and I realized that my mother was this. I had a resentment toward my mom because she wasn't an alcoholic. She didn't drink, but she ate, and she smoked 4 packs of cigarettes a day. Her father, my grandfather, was an alcoholic, and I realized that it wasn't willful. It wasn't that she didn't want to get better. It was that she had a brain dis-ease, an uneasiness that was gifted to me, and in fact, I've gifted it to my kids. What I've come to understand now is there's a myriad of ways that I now can regulate my mood, and it's from a whole sort of practices that I do, and I've traded off negative behaviors for positive behaviors. You know, I called in my book Asylum. I called it my 7 deadly symptoms because I have a dis-easiness inside me, and it's like a bake clock. It's always running, and it was first my primary dis-easiness behavior was my eating disorder. I got really fat by the time I was 13 years old. Then I wanted girls to like me, so I thought if I was thin, and I starved myself the way I ate. And that created a feeling of euphoria. Right. And I've been chasing that feeling my whole life. It went from that to shopping, to stealing, to masturbation, to sex, to alcohol. And actually, I stopped drinking alcohol because it started putting weight on me. And when I discovered prescription drugs, Vicodin, Oxycodone, Percocet, which is all heroin, right?
They're all opiates.
Yeah. I loved it because it curbed my appetite, and it made me thin.
Right.
You know? So, you know, I think that this conversation, for me, is less about the drug. I believe that the addiction is a byproduct of your emotional state.
Yeah, we're definitely agree with you with that. I mean, we come from a position that I actually think that almost every addict, if not all addicts, suffer from sort of dual diagnosis, and that there's an underlying mental health issue that supports most addictions, and that most people that become addicted are trying to self-medicate in some way. Nobody really wants to be dysfunctional to the point of using something to the point where they're not able to live a normal course of life. It's only because the pain on the other side is so extreme that they're trying to figure out a way to fix it. Unfortunately, sometimes they get caught up in that thing that they're trying to use to self-medicate, and that becomes more destructive than even some of the underlying pain. But the vast majority of people, and people don't realize that, 50+% of people in the United States are going to have at least one episode of major depression or some extreme form of anxiety. And that puts everyone in those categories at a high risk of using some sort of substance as a way to cope.
And we're only doing what we've been programmed to do. From the propaganda, commercial propaganda that tells us to eat sugary,
crap.
Cereal, and I use the television. I think this began. I think that this soul sickness that has diseased our nation is that from the beginning of TV, and when advertisers realized that they could brainwash us into buying whatever they put up on that screen. We are a nation that's addicted to something. 48% of our nation is obese. We have diabetes, type 2 diabetes. By 2050, 95% of us will be obese. And they put sugar in everything, right? We want to know why the McDonald's French fries taste so good, because they're soaked in sugar.
Right.
And sugar is as addictive, and it's the sugar and the alcohol that makes us that's the feeling of it after. And so I just think we're pretty much screwed unless we start working on kids starting in kindergarten, so that it's cool to be out there. It's cool to be emotionally intimate. And that if I knew when I was 11 years old that I could say to somebody, I feel bad, I feel sad, and I don't know why. Because at that age, I thought I was the only person that felt like that. And I wanted to be like Tommy or Billy or Bobby.
Well, I think loneliness is definitely a common trait of most people that end up becoming addicted. And a lot of that also is lack of information. But even when knowing all the information in the world, you can still become an addict. And I think you're absolutely right about not necessarily just television, but advertising, the whole concept of advertising. Because I remember prior to like 84, you didn't really see a lot of advertising for men. And then Calvin Klein came along, and all of a sudden there were ads for like men's underwear and all this stuff.
And he ruined it for guys like us.
Well, and, and now you see.
Yeah, I could never wear those.
Yeah, right.
They look good on Brooke Shields.
If you just tuned in, you're listening to KLEAN Radio. That you hear the voice you hear is Joe Pantoliano. Give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222.
Pantoliano. It's Joe Pantoliano.
Joe Pantoliano. And also call in.
Jews always screw it up.
Okay, let's just go with Joey Pants, a.k.a. Joey Dynamite. And if you were in Philly one year, Joey, I don't know.
The Jews and the Italians are going to fight here in the studio.
800-222-5222.
Turf war.
I love what you're talking about, though, because, you know, you're talking about mental health and mental illness, and you know, one of the reasons we wanted to...
I'm not talking about mental illness. I'm talking about mental wellness. You know, I think mental illness is so stigmatizing.
I agree with
that
you.
we need to get rid of it.
Okay, just so you know, that's been a huge talking point on our show, is changing the words.
Yeah.
Because you hear mental illness, call it a mental vacation.
We call it a brain, you know, NKM2, we've gone out of our way to just call it a brain disease, because we believe that our brain should be... should have the same parity as our liver, as our heart, as our kidney, and it shouldn't be quantified. If somebody now ODs, and a lot of people are ODing, and it's really suicide, but they recover, and they're in the emergency room, they'll call the insurance company, and they'll say, and then the doctor has to negotiate with the insurance company and figure out how many days they'll be able to have that person in care.
Yeah, I mean, I watched the decline of inpatient acute care, psychiatric care, and that's one of the reasons that I started opening up residential treatment centers. Back in the late 80s, you used to have an average length of stay in around 90 days for someone that, say, tried to kill themselves. The first 30 days you'd use just to evaluate, and then the second 2 months you'd use to treat, and then be following ongoing care. Nowadays, you're lucky if you get 3 to 7 days in a hospital, and then they just discharge you. So what I found was that there was this niche of residential treatment where it's not locked down psychiatric care, but you can treat psychiatric conditions called dual diagnosis conditions, as long as there's a primary substance abuse problem on top of that.
You know, Corbett Monica, who works out of Oregon, where the old Oregon State Hospital was, where Dr. Dean Brooks, who just recently passed away, allowed them to make the movie on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
We actually have a client that calls in.
We don't ruin the surprise.
So, but Corbett started a dual diagnosis 12-step about 15 years ago, and we went there to show my documentary, No Kidding Me Too, which examines stigma and shame associated with brain disease, and why is that? You know, if we looked at our emotional distress as we looked at like, say, the flu, there's not a kid in the country that would get the flu and be ashamed for having it, because it's socially acceptable. If we promoted this discussion like they sell Viagra, you know, hundreds of thousands of people would
be up.
Yeah, they'd be fine. You know, we'd be talking to each other. We'd be growing together.
There's always been a stigma on the mentally ill. Part of that's been sort of this Calvinistic sort of view that it has something to do with religion and behavior. And because the mind and mental health does affect behavior, then there's also the concern of what's criminal behavior and what's mental health.
But, you know, I researched and it only happened after 1865. President Lincoln was seriously depressed. They called it melancholia. And in his time, it was called, it was thought to be that you're more sensitive, you're more in tune, you know, and that's really true for all, you know, for those of us that have suffered. It is that we're more sensitive and we have empathy, and so we feel what other people are feeling, and it's a good thing. But socially, we're taught that it's a bad thing. So we need a drink to make it go away.
But I also think a big thing you're talking about is that, you know, I really relate to, and I think a lot of people, that 11-year-old kid, and we have to open up the dialogue, because there's so many people out there. We live a lot of times in the bubble of whether it's New York or LA, where, you know, we talk about addiction and stuff like it's really no big deal. but there are people all across America that are suffering and don't know what to say. You know, if you're a guy in your 40s or you're a woman even, and to walk over to somebody and say something's wrong, and I don't know what it is, and so what you're doing with coming out with this stuff, maybe it will be helping a lot of people, because people look at you and go, oh my God, if that guy is going through that stuff, it might give other people the courage, and it might start that we have 11-year-old kids that have enough courage to say, I need help.
Well, the other thing, there's been incredible advances in medicine. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, 30, 40 years ago, that the prescription for anxiety from a doctor was cigarettes. Just smoke, and that'll make you feel better. And because it would calm you down. The nicotine would calm you down. Yeah,
that was my
on that prescription.
I had that doctor. Yeah.
So we've come a long, long way from there, and we continue to improve. The part that's medication based is important in that it can help with some of the symptoms, but the best outcomes always come when you combine therapy and some sort of program along with medication. If you just use medication, you only temporarily cover up that problem, and what we see is people shift to some other behavior that's equally destructive.
Have you guys seen this TED Talk with Logan? I think his name is Logan LaPierre. He's a 13-year-old kid talking about how happiness is not taught in our curriculum.
Well, have you seen the teachers?
well, what he talked about, and it's powerful because his parents and their friends took the kids out of school. So what they're doing now is they're homeschooled, and they're learning how to hack an education by using the internet to find things they care about. But what he quoted a guy named Dr. Roger Walsh, who created or discovered that therapeutic lifestyle changes, TLCs. It's about a 12-month course. But it's for emotional wellness, and what the necessary factors are, and it's 7, I believe: exercise, diet, nutrition, time in nature, contribution and service, relationships, recreation, relaxation and stress management like yoga or meditation, and religious or spiritual connection with God or higher power.
Freud said it was love and work.
Love and work.
And if you just tuned in, you're listening to Clean Radio. We're going to get to your calls after the break, so give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222. It's 800-222-5222. We're in the studio tonight with an amazingly talented man who happens to also be an actor. He's been in movies. One of my favorites, obviously, was The Goonies, but also Midnight Run, and It Doesn't End Risky Business, and
Memento,
I know.
Bound,
Well, I love
The
Bound.
Fugitive.
I love Bound for many other reasons.
But what have you done lately?
Well, you just landed a CBS pilot.
I just landed a CBS pilot.
It was so funny because I talked to Lemmy from Motorhead, and I said I'd love Ace of Spades. He said, yeah, have you listened to any of my 34 albums since then? And then walked away from me. I was like, oh, damn.
Okay, and Breaking Bad and The Sopranos. I didn't want to embarrass you.
I wasn't on Breaking Bad, you prick.
The discussion continues at Clean Radio.
Don't let addiction to drugs or alcohol steal another year of your life. KLEAN Treatment Center provides world-class addiction assistance that also treats the underlying causes and provides vital aftercare so people can get clean and stay clean. Live, kind, professional help is standing by to provide immediate assistance or to simply answer questions and provide guidance. If you or someone you care about is suffering from addiction, take action now and make 2014 the best year of your life with KLEAN Treatment Center. Now back to Andrew Spanswick and Judah Friedman.
Welcome back to Clean Radio. We're in the studio tonight with Joe E. Pants. And,
oh, come on.
I like that, Joe E. Pants.
Yes.
Like Joey Brown.
Star of Cheers and Family Ties. And, a huge advocate you've become for mental health. And
mental wellness, yeah.
Mental wellness and mental breaks and mental vacation. I think it's so important. I wanted to joke tonight that the Oscars were canceled due to narcissism, and I forgot to throw that joke in. But one of the things is we idolize. We become a nation idolizing celebrity in so many ways for the wrong reasons. A couple years ago, one of my favorite movies was Silver Linings Playbook, and because it was one of the first movies that truly dealt and tried to deal with mental what? mental wellness, and
brain health.
And I love that the director David O. Russell, his son was in the movie. His son has deals with bipolar, and it was sort of a dedication to his son. And we obviously know so many actors, so many celebrities are dealing with this stuff, but it's amazing that you're one of them that's coming forward.
But the thing is that 5 years ago we didn't call it that. We said it was heroin addiction or alcoholism, and we never talked about the mental component. But because of people in the limelight coming out and saying, "I've got this, I'm dealing with it, I can have a good life." 80% of mental disease is fixable. 80% of the time, if you go for treatment. And what?
Well, it's treatable. It's not necessarily curable.
Well, I said fixable.
Yeah.
My son is a wellness coach. He is body, mind, spirit. He teaches people what to eat. Anything we put in our body is either going to cause disease or prevent it. Anything, whether it's a hot dog or a line of drugs. And I think if we can make this conversation make it more cool to be working on an emotional problem than it is to have your drug dealer on speed dial. A lot of kids take drugs because they want to feel a part of something. So what we've got to do is get them early enough, because we're a nation that fixes things only when they break. Mm-hmm. Only when you become a drug addict and alcoholic, then there's a program for you. So what we need to do is a preventative program, so that when a kid is diagnosed with something by the 3rd grade, he doesn't feel like an outcast. If you tell those kids in kindergarten that 60% of you are going to be dealing with this in 3 years, when that kid is taken out of the class, he doesn't feel like, and they don't feel like he is. And then grandma and grandpa, when they say, "Oh, what a sin, there's nothing wrong with you," the kid will be able to stand up for himself.
Yeah, I definitely think that, we do need to be more caring. Generally, as a culture, we have a tendency to, for whatever reason, think that people should not ever have problems.
Well, it's scary. It scares people.
And that all these things are a crutch. I mean, I remember growing up and hearing very clearly, messages that, smoking was a crutch, or using any kind of alcohol was a crutch. And but there was not necessarily any solution to, well, I feel a lot of anxiety.
Well, it was just say no. It was the Just Say No campaign.
Well, but don't you agree? If you feel anxiety, you should feel it. Right?
Yeah.
If you feel depression, you should feel it. You got to stop running away from it.
To a point. I mean, I think that there's a point where the actual illness of anxiety disorders and depression become uncontrollable and become part of actually a pathological pattern of illness, and that aren't healthy anymore.
But I think by that time, you've been living a lie and a secret, and you are as sick as your secrets. If you tell somebody who's feeling anxiety to put on a pair of sneakers and run around the block, and then ask them how they feel,
that's a paradoxical intervention. So we do that a lot actually with people with anxiety disorders. They feel like they're having a panic attack. You tell them to get up and do jumping jacks, and they don't die of a heart attack. And they're like, oh, they start laughing because they thought they're going to die of a heart attack. So, but what's causing that underlying anxiety disorder and those panic attacks could be much, much more complex, and sometimes takes a while to figure out. And we do have medications that can stop people from reaching that high level of panic and be able to function day to day, while they also therapeutically work out what's causing that underlying anxiety. And whether that's cognitive behavioral therapy, which can change behavior, or whether it's actually psychoanalytic work that uncovers the underlying reasons why someone is feeling a lot of anxiety.
What did you say Freud said a minute ago?
The two most important things in life were work and love.
Work and love. And I think that's got a lot to do with these symptoms. I think a lot of our behaviors that have been given names because the drug companies can make a lot more money, we were all acting out like this 10 years ago, but now people want to know what they have, and they want to identify it by the drugs they take. And it's like, either I feel well or I feel off. I remember it would be like, mommy's in a bad mood.
Look,
you know?
I definitely agree with you. There's a huge middle ground, and that's become sort of the worried well spectrum, right? I mean, I've worked a lot of years in inpatient acute care, psychiatric hospitals where people suffer from extreme levels of bipolar illness, and they've tried to kill themselves from major depression. People that have anxiety disorders where they're crippled and they can't function. Schizophrenia, which is an illness that's extremely prevalent in our country, and we has created an institutionalization of people in prisons instead of mental health hospitals. So there's those people that really are so mentally ill and can't, or largely ignored, or don't have the resources to get help. Then as the spectrum goes down, you get into mixtures of that. And then eventually you get to the point where people actually are able to do well without any medication. But, knowing that line of where you are in that spectrum is really hard to tell yourself, or even for clinicians sometimes to figure out, without really working with a patient for a long time, where they are in that spectrum, whether it's temporary situational stuff or whether they actually have some sort of organic illnesses that actually is pretty extreme.
We have calls lining up, guys. If you just tuned in, you're listening to KLEAN Radio.
I just think we're both right.
Yeah,
we are.
But we can't ignore the fact that there is extreme mental illness.
I just think it's important that listener knows it's not. It shouldn't be that complicated for them. My documentary covered a guy, because I made the documentary because I kept meeting people of these amazing success stories. And, and every time I saw a documentary about mental illness, it was like, dark, dark music. And, it was never going to get better, and woe is me. And I wanted to make something accessible and fun to watch. And I have 6 individuals from all different brain styles, all in recovery, all doing, all functioning. And one of them has been diagnosed with schizophrenia and is now married and is a NAMI peer support specialist.
Right, but even with schizophrenia, you have to recognize that, and you don't have to recognize, I don't mean to be condescending by saying that, but sorry, I hate it when people say that to me. But
it almost happens never.
But even with schizophrenia, there's many different types of schizophrenia and very many different levels of severity of the illness. Right. And it comes on and gets worse generally.
But you're a doctor, and so that's important for you. But for the patient, and not the consumer, because I don't know why they call us consumers. It's really discriminating, and I don't think it's stigma or shame we're talking about. We're talking about discrimination and bigotry toward people who have an emotional disease, because all of these, there's a lot of organizations that say, please help those poor people, my poor brother or my poor sister who's bipolar. We're all touched by this. 1 in 4 Americans are affected by by mental disease, whether they've gone through it themselves or a loved one's going through it. More and more people are killing themselves. I went to Iraq with my movie because the military asked me to bring it there because 25 GIs commit suicide every day. Yeah. So we've had 4,500 GIs killed in action, and we've had 75,000 killed by their own hand.
Right.
You just tuned in. That's Joey Pants, and you're listening to KLEAN Radio. Let's say hello to some people. Let's go to Sue in Portland. How are you doing, Sue? Sue, I can't hear you. Sue, you might be talking to somebody else at the same time. We'll put you back on hold. Let's go to Heather. Heather?
Andrew, it's nice to have you back. I've missed you.
Oh, thanks, Heather. Yeah, unfortunately, my father passed away, so I've been in New York for the last 3 weeks. So
you've been surviving the cold?
It was very cold up there.
Yeah. Well, it's not as bad as Vermont.
Well, there you go.
So Heather, how can anything with the topic tonight?
Yes. One of the things that I'm trying to get back on track for my goals and getting back into exercise and eating healthier and all that kind of thing, because I've been off track for about a month or a month and a half as far as that stuff is going. But, what I'm also sort of realizing that I'm moving into is trying to move into mindfulness and being more aware of what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling and whatnot, because, it's easy to numb out. But one of the things I was wondering, Andrew, if you could broach on it, I've noticed is that, it's not all emotions. It's like I have no problem, like, processing and feeling other people's emotions. But feeling my own emotions, I have difficulty with.
I think you're
Well, you know, there's a lot of mechanisms within yourself, and I think a lot of people are socialized and taught not to necessarily take responsibility or feel their emotions, to deny them, because we're not supposed to be weak. There's this sort of societal idea that no matter what, you have to be strong, and that any sign of weakness is going to be held against you, or you're going to be punished for it. And that has largely driven the stigma for mental illness and for addiction, is that it's been seen as sort of a sign of failure or of a lack of moral fortitude. And whether we consciously realize it or not, that stigmatization really affects us, and it affects how we feel about ourselves, and it affects our ability to go out and talk to other people. So a lot of learning to deal with your own feelings is learning how to become humble and realize that, you know what, it's not that important really necessarily what everybody thinks about me. It's really important about how I feel about myself.
It's like you can't save your butt and your face at the same time.
Exactly.
And, you know, at a certain point, in order to get help, you have to be willing to what you think is losing face.
But I also think like the society in some ways, as much as it's changing for the bad, there's parts of it that are changing for the good. Yeah. And there's a lot of people out there that now are competent, have been trained well, are willing to listen. Yeah. There's plenty of places to get help. And it's just a matter of engaging with those people and finding the right people and not being, you know, terrified to say, hey, you know what, I don't agree with you and I actually want to get help from somebody else. So. And
Heather, getting back into the gym, not that I am one to speak of this, is just starting tomorrow. Forget about the last month and a half that you haven't done it.
This weekend I did.
Okay.
Yesterday and today I went to the gym, and actually that was a quote I put on the KLEAN Radio thing, that my thought for the day was, you know, if I beat myself up for what I didn't do yesterday, it might keep me from doing what I need to do today.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's very true.
That's great.
I'm working on,
maybe
what are
you
my
can start
other
posting instead
thoughts?
of me, Heather, because I'm running out of quotes to come up with, so you're more than welcome.
Plus, Judah can't get a name right on the radio.
And Heather, you know, there are great 12-step programs out there that, you know, doesn't cost anything, and you find people that are having the same problems doing things as you do, and it's really empowering.
Yeah, I mean, and actually that's one of the things that I did get back on track, is that I did go to a women's AA meeting yesterday, and
that's great.
Shared there, and I got telephone numbers. Now I just have to, you know,
just call one. Just call one. Don't, just call one.
The people on the other side are waiting for you to call just as much as you need to call. So, you know, never feel like there's a reason to delay calling somebody. Even if you call up and just say, hey, I just need to talk to someone for a second. And
like you do with us, call one person. Heather, check in next week. Let us know. Make sure you call two people.
Good to hear you're doing well, Heather.
Heather, thank you.
Bye.
If you just tuned in, you're listening to KLEAN Radio. We're in the studio tonight with Joey Pants, star of many things, but starring right now in his own life. And because you've overcome the demons, you're overcoming.
I'm in battle, and I'm surrendered to my demons. Actually, I'm not battling them. I've surrendered to my demons.
You've obviously though made this a very important part of your life.
Yeah.
I mean, it's clear from just speaking with you.
It's
briefly
affected everything.
Yeah,
everything has changed, and I'm not, and I've had nothing to do with it. You know,
even though Judah doesn't know you weren't in Breaking Bad, you know,
I could have been.
He could have been.
He could have been a contender.
The fame thing, you know, it's like a lot of people want that. You talk about like this new generation of people that want to be liked on Facebook, you know, 2 million times, and they put themselves out there falling in a ditch, and all of a sudden they think they're going to be famous. Yeah. You know, what is that appeal? What was that appeal for you, and how do you now view your fame versus the way you did before?
I never wanted. I mean, growing up, my what do they call them? Mentors or people I wanted to be like.
Yeah.
Were actors that I admired. I wanted to be a successful performer, and so that I would be able to contribute and have a hand in exposing life. You know, representing life and so that people could see a reflection in themselves through the characters I played. Celebrity was a byproduct of the success. You know, I went to acting school for 15 years. I went to speech classes. I even had to learn how to read because I was dyslexic. Mm-hmm. But I think now many people just want to be celebrity.
Right.
And because of all of these shows, that are really built on sand. They are put together, and then they wait for celebrity to hit the people in the show so that they start falling apart.
Yeah.
And they start.
Well, it's like The Biggest Loser. The woman lost way too much weight just because she didn't look good. But the whole world, first they were like, oh, she came out, and the next day everybody's like, she's anorexic. She's got a weight issue. She got her stomach stapled. So it was the first moment everybody's like, oh my God, congratulations, you won $250,000 the next day.
Well, but they are promoting disease. Obesity is a disease, and then they go, okay, so now let's lose the weight, and then so you lose the weight the way you put it on. It's obsessive compulsive behavior, and it's rewarded.
Yeah, or binge drinking now has become the big thing on TV. I mean, most of these reality shows, it's just people drunk all the time.
And binge watching the
crazy
binge
stuff.
drinking.
Yeah, they go.
Kids
Kids go into department stores and binge drink a shot and take their clothes off. And
if you just tuned in, by the way, you're listening to KLEAN Radio.
That's advertising, though. See, we're back to advertising. It's like we see this stuff and it tells us, and it's controlling our minds. I think you do what I did in my house, and we cut up all the cable. We watch everything through the Wi-Fi. We see no commercials, and I watch no news.
But on your news show on CBS, you shouldn't, and you should watch it with the commercials because that's important.
No, they should watch the show because it'll be entertaining, but don't watch the commercials.
I mean, even if you watch it by buying the download, you're still supporting the industry.
No, exactly.
That's fine.
Let's go to Sue in Portland. Welcome, as always, Sue. How you doing?
I'm doing really good. How are you doing?
Good. You're in the studio. Well, we're here with Joey Pants. Say hello.
Hi, Joey Pants. What an honor to meet you. And
thank you, Sue.
Love your message, and it is the message of truth. I talked to you, gentlemen, gosh, it's been about a month ago now, and you said, check in next week, and I was in a bad place, just at a low, suffering from the disease, and I've been in recovery I just celebrated 25 years.
Wow, happy birthday.
Thank you. I thank you so much. And, coming to find I'll call them the root issues of part of the disease, and having spent, I traded in the white picket fence for therapy, and it's the best choice I ever made, to choose self over possessions and money, because I got the lesson later anyway that people are more important than money. But I'm in a good place now because I'm recommitting myself. I just had my belly button birthday as well, and I've had a really tough last couple of years. I cared for my mom as she died in our home. What a gift to be able to not have regrets for not doing that. But did too much, and I agree with the being much more sensitive than others. And I think that, unfortunately, not to badmouth AA, because AA saved my life, but many times in the big book it talks about Dr. Bob and Bill and the depression and the underlying, what I feel, mental health issues that were there, that they were medicating and knew they were medicating, and Dr. Bob with opiates himself. And so in my freedom, unfortunately, I agree with not PCP, primary care physicians, but not the drug, but the physicians they're giving opiate drugs to folks that have pain, and in turn they get addicted to the pain medication, and they refer them to a pain clinic, never find the underlying source. Which
right, it's like the vicious cycle.
It
Sue,
is.
yes,
And
Sue,
then
listen.
you have to get back off.
Sue, we got to run, but thank you. Call back next time a little earlier, and she raises some good points.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, we have a crisis in our medical field with regard to how we deal with these issues. And a lot of it has to do with funding. Thankfully, there's a Parity Act that's come through and is going through. And hopefully that will allow for more treatment and awareness of how to treat the mentally ill and provide more availability for treatment. But a little health insurance reform is not going to really do what really needs to be done, which is a complete, real reform of mental health treatment and medical treatment in general.
Well, last week I posted, in a sense, I said for every marijuana, clinic that's open with the tax dollars spent, we should open up a mental health clinic.
And of course, that money's going to go to something else.
Right.
So.
It's not going to go to what's, the tax dollars.
Well, making making insurance accessible to all of us, so that we can go and provide, and if anybody's listening and can identify with anything we're talking about, it's time to talk to somebody you love and trust, and just tell them how you feel. You'd be surprised to hear what that they're going to talk about how they feel.
Let's go to Nicole in Scottsdale, Arizona. Welcome back, Nicole.
Judah, what up?
My goodness.
Apparently, I have a fan in Scottsdale.
Hi, no, it's Nicole and Karma. I moved to Scottsdale.
Oh, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. I have a year on the 23rd.
That's amazing.
Congratulations.
Happy birthday. And I don't want to say, Nicole, because we're very into HIPAA and client confidentiality. That's an amazing.
I think you just broke it.
Nicole, welcome as always. So on the 21st, you have a year, and I want to say, I'm so happy you're calling because, it's an amazing thing getting a year sober.
Yeah, it's crazy. It took me like 2.5 years to put this year together, but now my life is finally starting.
How old are you?
I'm turning 25 on the 9th.
And that's amazing because we have a lot of callers and a lot of listeners, and one of them called in last week, Andrew, you were gone, but he has a 24-year-old daughter, and he's hopeless because he can't get her help. And I know Nicole was in the same situation where it looked hopeless, and almost a year later, you have so much hope. And to people out there that are listening, I didn't pay Nicole to call in tonight. It's an amazing thing that you have almost a year sober.
Yeah, and I'm in school full time, actually doing life. It's crazy.
That is, and you have a really cute dog.
I know. I'm going to be in town on the 23rd at KLEAN. You should come give me a cake. I
will give you a cake if I can, and because it's sort of, yes.
Yes, that's a yes.
That's a yes. I will be giving you a cake. Nicole, it's an honor, and we'll talk to you later.
See you on the 23rd.
Happy birthday. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Let's take that other call. He's been waiting for a while.
Yeah, let's get to Mike in Irvine. Mike, welcome to KLEAN Radio.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much for getting my call, and it's the first time. I'm very much enjoying what you presenting and trying to help people with. I have a very interesting thing to tell you about the health all over.
Mike, you have to speak up a little bit.
Oh, can you hear me better?
Yeah, that's
now?
right. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, my apology. What I'm trying to say is that to help people, I have a oxygen therapy that helped my mother, saved her breast from breast cancer, and saved my brother-in-law in Germany from his prostate cancer. And it's fantastic because what it does, it also helps your brains to cleaning totally your brain out. And,
Mike, we're running out of time, so if you have information on that, go ahead and paste it on our Facebook page. It's KLEANTreatmentCenter.com Facebook.com/KLEAN Treatment Center. There's a lot of people with a lot of different cures for stuff. So
but the cool thing is, Mike is calling in and talking about it, and we're talking about treatment. We're talking about mental health. We're talking, and we're talking about getting help, Joe. And I think this is an amazing thing because even as I was younger, when I was that 11-year-old kid, like you were talking about, it might not have prevented my addiction, but it would have been nice if somebody would have walked up to me and said, "I get what you're going through. Mm-hmm. I know what you're going through." And like you said, if we start in kindergarten, imagine the amount of people that we could help.
Yeah, and nothing is easy. Life is a bumpy road. Everybody, like tonight is the Academy Awards. I believe it when I tell you that everyone in that building has had failures, and they've taken risks in being wrong, because you have to be wrong in order to have anything original. You have to make mistakes in order to come up with anything original. None of this stuff is a quick fix, and whether it's success or emotional wellness, it requires hard work, but it's worth it.
And what's the name of your documentary?
No Kidding Me Too. You can go to nokiddingme2.org, and or you can see it on iTunes or Amazon.
Is that written out, or is it the number? No Kidding Me Too.
Either way.
Either way.
Any
Okay.
way you want, you'll find it.
And
Amy Winehouse, before she died, donated Rehab as our cover song.
Oh, really?
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And so, and you have a CBS show coming out pretty soon, which is amazing.
Yes, it's a pilot for CBS, and we're going to shoot it in a couple of weeks, and I'm hoping that it'll be on the fall schedule.
Is it going to be like Breaking Bad, or
no?
Or Cheers.
It's a sitcom. It's a sitcom.
A sitcom. Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, and it's Tom. I can't believe I'm doing this. My brain. Anyway.
Tom.
Yeah, Tom.
He's anonymous. let's just
Sorry, it's only live radio.
Wonderful comedian.
Hopefully he's not listening right now.
And Joe, I mean, I want to say this from the bottom of my heart. In the end of the day, you've been in so many things, but I hope people will remember you for the amount of people you've helped and you will help with talking about mental.
Well, I just think it's really admirable, and the fact that you're showing that being a celebrity and fame took hard work, and that really that doesn't necessarily fill all the holes. There's so much more to life, and I'd like that you're giving back like that. It's a real pleasure to meet you.
And I think and I think everybody out there listening tonight, if you're going through something, you don't have to do this alone. And I love Joe's story, and it's the story of everybody in here. Is that we had a moment where we were able to go to somebody, I need help. And if you need that, call us at 888-601-6040. That's 888-601-6040. It's completely anonymous. It's completely free. I'd like to thank everybody, all our fans out there. Steve, Rand, Patrick, Andrew, welcome back. I'm sorry about your dad.
Thanks, Judah. Yeah.
And Joe Pantoliano. And the discussion continues at KLEANradio.com.
Don't let addiction to drugs or alcohol steal another year of your life. KLEAN Treatment Center provides world-class addiction assistance that also treats the underlying causes and provides vital aftercare so people can get clean and stay clean. Live, kind, professional help is standing by to provide immediate assistance or to simply answer questions and provide guidance. If you or someone you care about is suffering from addiction, take action now and make 2014 the best year of your life with KLEAN Treatment Center.